He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That's Birds 365. We are joined by one of the most astute football minds and writers in the country. He's been doing it for a long time. Mr. Paul Domowitch joins us each and every single Friday. Now that I buttered you up, Domo, please explain the hip drop tackle.
Oh, good. I'm glad you went here because I need somebody with Paul's experience to explain to me what the hell the NFL is doing. The players don't want it. Nobody wants it. Everybody's on there complaining, and the NFL, we got to do this. We got to do this. Why? Why, Dama?
Well, I'm assuming their injury numbers show that it causes injuries. The problem is with the hip drop, it's not something guys do intentional, like the, when you grab the back of a jersey, and drag a guy down, your mind knows you're doing it. The hip drop's a little tougher to abstain from. I mean, you're just trying to tackle a guy, you grab him around the waist and then you go down. You're not trying to do anything to him nefarious. You're just trying to tackle him. Yeah. And, it's a danger. Guys get hurt that way. Trying to think
Mark Andrews. Mark
Andrews got hurt that way,
and I forget who tackled Mark, but I'm sure it was a defensive back trying to drag him down at all. Mark's a big, powerful guy, and he got a deep back, just trying to get him on the ground, basically.
It typically is a smaller guy trying to tackle a bigger guy. But again, he's not trying to do anything, dirty or hurt him. It just kind of happens. And maybe the numbers show, you're right. They are trying to be, it's a violent game. It's a dangerous game. People are going to get hurt. You make a mistake when you try to clean it up too much to the point where you think you can get rid of all injuries like they're doing with kickoff returns. It's only a matter of time before they completely eliminate the kickoff.
Yeah, no, I actually think they're going the other way. And I said this to John yesterday, and I want to know if you concur. The problem with it is, it sounds like we all have problems. Come on, it's still football, right? We're still playing a tackle game, and we're going to legislate tackles, which just boggles the mind to begin with. But the thing that's going to make it even worse is, Damo, it's a really subjective call. You have to decide whether the guy is just trying to make a legitimate tackle or if he is specifically putting himself down further to give himself a better angle and leverage to pull the guy down. That's going to be real subjective. I don't know if I could do it in slow motion instant replay and then go, yeah, oh no, he was trying to pull him down, as compared to full speed. And you're going to ask the refs to make this call in full speed. That's going to come down as really subjective, and you're going to hear the boos raining down in stadiums when that flag comes out of the ref's pocket.
Yeah, it's as difficult as, the helmet hit, where, when the ball carrier drops his head, you have no way of knowing whether, the intention, whether you're trying to use his head or whether it would just happen to be that, the guy with the ball dropped down and there was an incidental collision. So yeah, it doesn't. We bitch about the mistakes the officials make, yet things like this make their job even more difficult.
Impossible. They make it impossible. And I'll get to the gambling stuff in a second because this opens them up for even more problems in my estimation. But I'm taking a shot at Troy Vincent here, Damo, because great Eagles corner at one point. I'm not talking about, but now he's obviously one of the big wigs in the NFL. He did a conference call yesterday talking about the hip drop tackle, amongst other rule changes, and he gave this bullshit. And I'm saying bullshit. Oh, 20 to 25% greater injury rate. Okay. Anytime you're at that level, what is it? Is it 20, 21, 22, 20? What is it, Troy? So right there, I'm calling. If I could raise my hand, Damo, I would have said bullshit. And where are these studies? And why can't we find these studies? And why can't we see these studies? I do not understand this league. Now, I'm also at the other end. I don't know what their end game is because I know they don't care about players' health. They won't change the turf. They'll battle that till the end of death because it will cost an extra couple $1 million to replace turf with grass. So they don't care about the players. It's always about legal indemnification, but is there some grandiose going on that I don't recognize or realize? But 20 to 25, bullshit.
They just have people with too much time on their hands. I mean, the competition committee generally are the people that come up with some of these rule changes with regard to player safety, and they're the ones that do the studies on statistics, or at least they have injury statistics, or at least have people that do them for them. But you're right. I mean, you go back to, for years, this league turned the other way on concussions, even though they knew that they caused long-term brain trauma and CTE. And now we're making a big deal of hip drop tackles. It's kind of ludicrous.
I do think it's legit. I think they have a reasonable purpose. I think they're trying to remove some injuries. Key players, they got lucky in that no major quarterback went down with this type play, because they're not usually out there running on the edge where you would see a hip drop tackle. Yeah. But a guy like Mark Andrews is a big-time player for the Ravens. But they don't think it all the way through, because are you now only going to throw the flag when a guy doesn't get up? So are you waiting? Uh-oh, he's hurt. Now the flag comes out. No, you can't do that. You have to call it as it happens. You have to react immediately if you're the referee. You can't just say, well, we want to put a procedure in place to take these potential injury led to tackles out of the game. You can't do it. Not in real time. So I don't think it was nefarious or anything like that. I think they had a reasonable reason to think about it and potentially put it into place. But
can I also add, there's always unintended consequences. If you guys watch Kirby Joseph of the Lions last year, he tore, it was TJ Hawkinson first. He tore his ACL and his MCL going low after Hawkinson caught a pass. And then 2 weeks later, tore Tyler Higbee's ACL and MCL. Exact same injury, exact same hit, because he's going low because he's not allowed to go high or he'll get 15 yards. And all of a sudden, you got two big-time tight ends with year-long injuries. It's unbelievable to me, the lack of I don't know what you want to call it, but the lack of common sense, basically, of this league. There's always unintended. And Kirby Joseph was like, because he got criticized. Oh, you're a dirty player. What do you want me to do? I can't go high. Now I can't go low. When are the flags? When are the flags? When are we getting the flag football, Paul Domowitch?
Soon, very soon.
All right, Dom, let's talk about, we had you on last Friday. The quarterback maneuvering at backup quarterback didn't happen till after you joined us last Friday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny Pickett is in. I got no problems with the acquisition. It makes some sense. It's kind of a Howie type move. Same thing they did with Gardner Minshew a couple of years back. However, on the same day, Justin Fields gets traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers after Kenny Pickett comes here, which means Justin Fields was available at what turns out to be a lesser price than Kenny Pickett, but only 1 year left on his contract as compared to two. The comparison between the two was on point and only natural because they both got dealt basically on the same day, a couple hours apart. If both were available, did the Eagles get the right guy, or should they have focused their attention on Chicago instead of Pittsburgh?
Well, I mean, I think Pickett's a better overall passer. It depends on what you're looking for. It surprised me a little bit in that, when you've got a starter like Jalen, the tendency, and their tendency has been to have the backup be a guy, for the most part, who has some sort of mobility, which obviously Fields would be more like Jalen than Kenny Pickett. I mean, Kenny's not going to run around on you for you. So, but he's got 22 starts. I mean, the numbers aren't very good. 13 and 13, I think, on touchdowns and interceptions, low yards per attempt in that Pittsburgh offense. So, I mean, I don't know what we'll find out eventually if he gets the chance to play at some point, if he's, how good he can be. I liked him coming out of college. I like this move. I mean, Fields is an intriguing guy because of the athletic ability, but there are a lot of people out there, and I'm assuming the Eagles were one of them, that just wonder if he's ever going to be become a good enough passer and decision maker to be able to play the position.
It's interesting because you're right about, styles of quarterbacks, and sometimes you want the similar type. Baltimore's done that in the past, trying to get somebody. You're never going to get somebody with the talent of Lamar Jackson, but similar traits. So if he goes down, he can play the same offense instead of shifting everything. There's other guys who like it. I think Nick Sirianni got a little bit bolstered when he had to play Gardner Minshew, and they saw it as a challenge. All right, can we get this guy ready this week? Blah, blah, blah. So you can go about it both ways, but does it tell you anything about Kellen Moore and the fact that he wants to add sort of more traditional, whether you want to call it a Shanahan type offense, play action, to this Eagles offense? When you make a decision, Kenny Pickett over Justin Fields, do they want to evolve Jalen Hurts into being more than what this offense has been, or just accentuate his strengths?
Well, I mean, I do think we might see less running from Jalen. I mean, they're still going to use him on the tush push, obviously.
Because that's back, by the way. Don't worry about the tush push.
Yeah, but when you look at Dak in Dallas with Kellen, I mean, he took some opportunities, but for the most part, he didn't run nearly as much as Jalen. So I do think we're gonna see a shift here where they're gonna tell, I mean, they've got to work with Jalen on, being more patient, and that's why, that's one of the reasons I think they brought in Barkley. This guy's going to be a receiver as much as a running back.
Even if they end up doing that and playing it that way, and Jalen runs a little bit less, we already saw a significant step backwards in that last year. If we see even another step back this year, it won't be because Kenny Pickett's here. And if they made the choice of take Kenny Pickett over Justin Fields because, hey, we're going to take a little bit less on the ground from Jalen this upcoming year, so therefore we don't need Fields.
No, I don't mean, but I don't think I'm saying they're changing because of Kenny Pickett. I'm saying, is that an indication they're changing?
Yeah. Number one, I don't think, if you're asking me to put a percentage on how much Kellen Moore had to do with that decision, less than 2. That's a 98% Howie Roseman move. I don't think it's, Kellen, what do you think? What do you think I should do here? No, I think Howie went and got Kenny Pickett because he's always liked Kenny Pickett and said, now you deal with it, Kellen Moore. I don't think Kellen Moore and his offense was the determining factor in that. I think it was Howie has guys that he remembers over time and then goes out and gets. And yeah, sorry, Damo, you, John, and everybody else who says Kenny Pickett was the better choice. You're just wrong, because Justin Fields is the better player. What you need to prioritize more than anything else, more than an extra year on the contract, more than Howie went and looked at him through binoculars when he played a Thursday night against North Carolina, is you get
10
the better
overtimes,
player.
I believe.
And overtime, right? Thank you for that, John. You take the better player, because if if Jalen Hurts is going to miss a month, you got to win those games. Eagles are a playoff team. They have to win those games. They can't worry about developing Kenny Pickett.
But what if they both stink? And
who gives you the better chance? You're right. They both may stink to this point. Neither one of them has made an NFL career.
Speaking of both stink, and when we're talking about Howie liking players in the draft, I want Paul Domowitch, I want you to go in your time machine and back to the year 2019. Were you team Paris or team J-Jaw?
I was neither, and they both turned out to be less than what was expected.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with them signing Campbell, but I mean, I wouldn't plug him in as the number 3 receiver right now. He gives you some depth to the roster, just like Parker does at that position, but I mean, I don't understand. I memean, when you played for the Giants last year, which had a shortage of good wide receivers, and you averaged 5.2.
5.2. And by the way, he ran a 4.31 coming out of college. How do you average 5 yards? I don't even know how it's possible. They had a bad quarterback situation. We all understand that. You know, it's one of the reasons people are excited about Saquon Barkley, but they had bad quarterbacks, and they did have bad quarterbacks. But 5 yards,
well, that goes well with what Parker finished. I think ranked each of the last 4 years.
4 years in separation. Yeah,
so,
next gen stats. Yeah,
I mean, this is a Howie move. A lot of these are Howie moves in that he's going by what they saw in the draft. A lot of these guys they liked, and or they, Parker was the first.
By the way, that was supposedly Jeffrey Lurie mess up.
Yeah,
he's the one who pushed them towards J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. And as I recall at the time, his tremendous catching radius, that was the thought. Yeah, which he's a big guy, but yeah, it helps. Speaking of separation, the most separation I think I ever saw J-Jaw get was from his mom when she had the parasol at training camp. Oh, that's a shot. That's a shot.
Uncalled for.
Hey, plug in Greg Ward, and you got your number 3 receiver.
Well, that's Jody's wheelhouse, man. Greg, is Greg still here?
I think this is it. I think this is the year that Greg doesn't even get the practice squad in.
I don't think they signed Greg. That's interesting. I have to double check. Did they sign him to a futures deal?
I don't think so.
I didn't. No, you're right. I don't think I saw any announcement. So, well, there wouldn't have been.
Yeah, because they brought in a bunch of guys at wide receiver on futures deals. And so Shaquan Davis, Jacob Harris, Austin Watkins are on futures deals, along with Joseph Nada and Griffin Abear, who was already here.
Yeah.
No Greg Ward. Yeah, they didn't sign.
He'll end up signing with Kansas City and catch about 35 balls this year.
That's not a bad
thing. I'm predicting he's an Eagles assistant quality control coach. Sometime given a contract sometime in May. That's just a.
Greg's only 28, by the way. Seems like he's been here for as long as Damo and myself.
No,
I never understood that. He and Jalen had some chemistry. He's an ex-quarterback. He knew how to read zones. I mean, he just for a number of reasons. Including the fact that he had that one very good year for them. Where
he had like 6 touchdowns, over 50 catches, and I think it was
Nick had
at least 8 yards per catch as opposed to Paris Campbell's 5 yards per catch.
Yeah.
All right. I want to go back to the quarterback thing for just 1 second here, Damo, because we got a comment from one of our streamers here. From
Eli Manning will not be in the Hall of Fame.
That's true.
We got time to get to that.
I lost all credibility when I said that, Damo, according to one streamer. I lost all credibility by daring to suggest Eli Manning is not a slam dunk Hall of Fame. No credibility. 0. I'm down to 0.
Bunchy Carter said this, and I'm just bringing Bunchy up because he's not the only one that said it. I've taken calls about it on WIP. Fields would have been a problem. Let's say Jalen has a string of bad games where he isn't playing well in the preseason, and Fields looks good. There will be outside chatter about it and pressure on Jalen. Pickett is not a threat. Okay, if you just subscribe to that theory, Jalen not playing well, Fields is looking good. You got a quarterback controversy. Jalen not playing well, Pickett is. Well, it doesn't matter because Pickett's not a threat. Why the F would you sign Pickett? You're acknowledging Fields is a better quarterback. Because when he's actually playing well, we might have a controversy. If Kenny Pickett's playing well, who cares? It's Kenny Pickett. He can't play. Why would you sign Kenny Pickett if that's your line of logic?
Well, I don't think it is.
I don't think the Eagles. That's the Eagles. That's some some dude's line of logic. I don't think that's the Eagles line.
I mean, I think.
Oh, you're telling me you think there is the possibility of a quarterback controversy if Jalen is struggling in
No.
preseason, doesn't seem to fit the.
I think that where's Justin Fields going to look good? Where
Yeah.
and the preseason against insert name or in this guy's head? Where's he going to look good?
The only thing about Justin Fields and quarterback, if you're a lot of fans, okay, he goes into a game, finds a hole, running for his life, gains 70 yards on a run. People just become fascinated by this. Never mind that he can't see the field. Never mind, that he's not accurate. Just they see a play like that and they just. So I mean, but that's not what was. That had no bearing on the Eagles' decision. They just believe Kenny Pickett makes a better backup. He's a better quarterback. But I mean, I think in a lot of minds, that's what happens with a player like Justin Fields. I think for a while there, you saw, with Jalen, people love to watch him run. And now we're 4 years in, and it's like, well, you don't want him to get hurt, so let him develop as a passer. And
did you ever? I'm sure I answered this at one time on Monday, every Friday we have you on. We all acknowledge that Jalen's running wasn't as good this year as last year, and there are probably 5 reasons, 6 reasons, 7 reasons why that was the case. In your mind, what was the number one reason why he didn't run the ball as effectively this year as he did last year, or as much?
Well, defenses. I mean, defenses being aware.
You think the other team figured it out?
Yeah.
Huh?
I mean,
I don't think he had the same explosion as he typically did. I don't know. I don't know why. Because people bring up the knee injury, but it was before that. So I don't know. Maybe there was something else he was dealing with. He's never going to admit it. So
see, and I don't agree with either of you. I think it was conceptual. Now, here's what I don't know. Was it Jalen's conception or was it the Eagles' conception? Because how many plays did we see last year where he gets forced out of the pocket, he starts upfield, and then he just sits down? Not even a slide. He just sits down.
Yeah.
That tells me that's up here. He's made a conscious decision. I can't put myself at risk. Or the Eagles hammered it into his head. Jalen, you can't put yourself at risk. Plays the year before where he'd try and put a move on a guy, outsprint a guy to the edge, and get a couple of yards before extending the football forward to get a couple more before it goes out of bounds. This year, it's just sitting on his rear end. That, to me, was the biggest reason. Those
decisions to slide or sit were not strictly his. I mean, he was told, we got to keep you healthy, and there's some wisdom in that. There were times when it looked like he could have got a few more yards before he slid, but I got no problem with that. And another thing, when you look at his numbers, Jody, I mean, you're right. He didn't run as well last year, and yet he had just as many rushing first downs as he did the year before. His average was down. His yards per carry average was down.
Touchdowns were up.
Yeah, the touchdowns were up. I mean, a lot of that has to do with the tush push.
Yes.
But the one thing he didn't have was the big 50. He didn't have as many 10, 15-yard plays as he did the year before when he would take off on a third down and have a big play. But so, I mean, he's still – the rushing first downs were still a critical part of their offense with him, him keeping the ball, keeping the moving the chains.
But how many of those were on the tush push? You get
I don't. What were the?
Inches, you get a yard and a half. It's nice you get the extra yard, but you're not exactly taking up chunks of the field. You get a first down.
I'm putting you on the spot, Domo, but you probably remember how many tush pushes were there last year? From the Eagles.
Don't remember the exact number, John, but it was slightly more than the year before.
Slightly more. That was my question, because if you look at Jalen Hurts in 2021, he ran it 139 times. In 2022, he ran it 165 times, and last season he ran it 157.
Yeah.
So he's right in the same range.
Yeah.
And the tush pushes were only slightly more.
They were in the 30s last year, and I want to say they were the low 30s, upper 20s the year before.
Yeah.
The biggest difference with that tush push last year, I mean, you see people say, well, the teams that didn't use it, also had success with the quarterback sneak, their percentage. The difference is most teams are only going to go for it if it's third and fourth or fourth and, inches, a foot,
Right.
foot and a half.
Yard or less.
Yeah, the Eagles by last year, if it's a full yard, they're going for it. They're not even thinking about it. And not only that, but the number of times last year on their tush pushes that they gained either 2 or 3 yards was just amazing. I mean, it just didn't happen with anybody else.
Well, so I don't even know how you rate the success. Like the Eagles will go if it's 3rd and 2, they might tush push. They know in the back of their mind they're going to go for it. Yeah. So when it's 3rd and 2 and you get a yard or a yard and a half, technically that's a failure on the tush push, but then you're going to tush push on 4th down and it's a success. So
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It'll be interesting this year with Jason gone.
Right. That's huge. How big do you think that's going to be? Do you think the percentage of conversions is going to drop slightly, significantly, precipitously? What are they going to do on the tush push without Kelsey?
I honestly don't know. I mean, they may figure out a way to use Landon Dickerson. He was a big part of it as well. But I mean, they may find a way to get him somehow, slant him. But yeah, it's big. We don't know what Cam Jurgens can do at center.
I think it's a bigger deal from this perspective. And I talked to Jason about this. He steals, yardage. He steals yardage all the time because he's a veteran guy and you could get away. He got caught a couple times. He got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He's trying to get a half yard, sticking the football out. Cam Jurgens isn't going to get away with that. A younger player. They're gonna have a much. I'm telling you, that's going to be an issue. I believe that because I tell the story of Tim Irwin. You might remember Tim Irwin, Damo. He was a longtime Minnesota right tackle, became an agent, very successful, played for like 15, 17 years, long time. And at the end of his career, Tim surprisingly held up well against Reggie White. And it was like, why? Because he tackled him. And he's been around for so long. They let him get away with it. And then all of a sudden, Corey Stringer comes in, much more talented player, rest in peace. Terrible situation. Much more talented player, but as a young player, they didn't let him get away with anything.
Yeah. The longer you've been in the league, the more you know what you can get away with.
Yes. And I think that's a big thing with Jason. I really do. We'll see how it shakes out. But I think there's going to be some growth. I think Cam's going to be fine overall. Don't get me wrong. But I think Cam Jurgens is he's got to earn some of that respect, or as you phrase it, maybe a better explanation. Learn what you can get away with. All
right. Damo, so far the Eagles have signed, correct me if I'm wrong here, John, I don't have it in front of me right now, 3 players to multi-year deals. CJ, GJ, Saquon, and Huff are the only players they've signed to multi-year deals. Every other free agent they've signed, I believe, is on a 1-year contract, correct?
Yeah.
Let me double check. Bond, he got a year. Hennessy got a year. Parker got a year. Devin White got a year. Burks, everybody else is a year.
Everyone else is on a 1-year deal. So of those who had to agree to, be happy for, all comes down to where you think they were in the league and what else was out there for them. Who's the best 1-year free agent that the Eagles have signed so far this year, Damo?
Well, I'm going to pick 2. I mean, Devin White, I got to believe, he knows he has something to prove. He was benched last year. If he can stay healthy, I think they got a real good linebacker.
You do?
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe because I think Devin White signed before we had you on last week. I'm surprised we didn't get to it because I would remember this. Both John and I think Devin White stinks. I'm surprised you think he's a really good line. Did you just really use that really word? Really good linebacker?
Yeah. I mean, this is how you look at
he's
him.
A really good athlete.
How he likes guys who either are coming off a poor year and have something to prove, who have been hurt like Matt Hennessy and have something to prove. That's why all these guys sign these 1-year deals. I just don't think Devin White, when you look back to 2020 and 2021, I mean, you don't suddenly stink that as much as he showed last year. I mean, and I think sometimes you have to come face to face with, playing that badly and being embarrassed and finding out that nobody wants you to make you kind of,
well, I agree and I disagree with you, Damo. One, I think he's been a bad player except for the Super Bowl run. He was tremendous. It's one of the greatest anomalies in sports in my mind. He had this 3-game run in Tampa's. You could argue he's the MVP of the team. That's how dominant he was in the playoffs. But in the regular season, he's always been. He makes a splash play because of his athleticism, but he makes a ton of mistakes.
He does.
Always has. Overruns plays, not very instinctive, not very good in coverage despite the athleticism. But I also agree with you in that of those 1-year contracts that Jody was mentioning, he's the best potential signing, the best lottery ticket. One, because he's going to get the opportunity to play.
Yeah.
The other guys, he's got to play. He's got to succeed. So he's got the best opportunity. And I did lighten up on him after I got to meet him. He seems like a smart kid, very intelligent. But boy, the film is ugly in Tampa.
You know what, though? He's in the right place right now. I mean, I think Vic Fangio is going to turn him around and bring him back to the player he was, and get rid of some of those undisciplined tendencies that he showed the last couple of years. I also think his blitzing ability is going to be a factor for them this year, because of they're not going to be as deep at edge rusher unless we see them unexpectedly bring back Hassan.
Yeah, we got it. We buried the lead. We got to get to Hassan.
So, I mean, they're going to need, his blitzing. They're going to need Zach Bond to become a sort of a factor as an edge rusher, things like that to make up for the lack of depth at edge on the outside.
Nolan Smith. I mean, that's got to be the guy on the edge. But what are your thoughts on the pushback of Reddick, 2 weeks to April 1st? That $1 million bonus they have to pay out. They can't keep 3 edge rushers at plus $10 million, can they?
They can for this year. I mean, Howie's done a good job. Before a couple of days ago, I think he still had the 4th or 5th most effective cap space in the league.
But a bunch of contracts aren't filed yet. CJ's isn't in there. White's, a bunch of them aren't.
Well, most of them, as will Reddick, if they redo it, are going to be low next year. I mean,
that's true.
They don't have to worry about dealing with the fallout from Jalen's contract for a couple of years yet. They seem, with all these 1-year contracts, they're clearly decided we're going to make a push this year if some of these guys can pan out. So I don't think it's a lost cause yet. I still think they're going to, I mean, Reddick wants to stay. I mean, Reddick's a Camden kid. I mean, aside from the money, he was never happier than he was here. And if I think they can, they're still close enough that I think they can get a deal done that will keep him around for at least another year.
Yeah, when I asked you the question about the 1-year deals, I understood what you said about Devin White. I think he's got a chance to play the most. Doesn't mean he's going to be the best player. He'll get the most snaps because the position right now is kind of open at best. Kind of like, Nicholas Morrow when they got him last year. You knew he's going to play. Yeah. You didn't necessarily believe he's going to play all that well, but you knew he's going to play a lot. That's kind of the way I'm looking at Devin White at this time. All right, we haven't talked about the coaches basically much all week, and it's an ongoing question until they actually get out there in the field. They're doing stuff behind closed doors that nobody knows. The relationship between the new offensive coordinator and the head coach who forever said, it's my offense. And then on a dime, he turned and said, it's our offense. John, I think it was before Damo came on, or maybe it was while you were on, Damo, talking about a move that they made and looking to what Kellen Moore will mean and How much of an effect do you think Kellen Moore's hiring has actually had on this offseason? Probably the biggest signing they've had is Saquon Barkley. Do you think that was Kellen Moore driven? Do you think that was an organizational decision? And here, Kellen, we're giving you more to play with, make the most of it. How much do you think the coaching changes have played into the Eagles' offseason decision so far here, Damo?
Well, I think I said this maybe last week. I'm not sure, but I mean, I think the defensive signings.
Yeah,
I think
well, Vic's different. You're right. Very good.
Had more input into those probably than Moore had into. I mean, Matt Hennessy was. Kellen Moore probably hadn't even watched any film of Matt Hennessy.
Matt Hennessy, come on.
Sterling may have, but probably did, but not. But the Barkley move, I think, had to have gone through Moore because you have to know how he's going to use him before you go out and sign him to a 3-year, $37 million contract. So, I think that's the one move where Kellen Moore had some real impact. He believes that, I go back to with Kellen Moore and the running backs to 2021, I think. Dak's big year before he got hurt and then had the 15 interceptions the year after that. He had a year where that offense Dak threw like 37 touchdown passes, and his running backs were, particularly Tony Pollard, were big parts of the passing game. And I think, that's what I go back to when I look at Barkley. I mean, he's gonna give them a more consistent inside presence. He's not gonna bounce everything outside like DeAndre Swift had a tendency to do. But more importantly, I mean, because the passing game is what you win with in this league. He can block. He's never going to be the liability out there that Swift was. Barkley can be a factor along with Gainwell in the passing game if they can convince Jalen Hurts that they need to be.
P. Damo, make sure you follow Paul on Twitter. X does a tremendous job. 33rd team, JAKIBsports.com in season. Well, I'll end it with Saquon. One of my biggest concerns, and I think it's probably what Jody was talking about. I think this is another Howie move. Howie has evidently loved the player forever, and he's finally had the opportunity to get him. And you brought up Dallas and more of Tony Pollard, but obviously for many years Zeke was the guy, and Dallas is not only one of the best running backs in the NFL, but a 3-down back and a good pass protector, at least in the modern era. So some of the same things. And I was looking at Zeke the other day, 1,500 touches. That was the drop.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's preordained by the football gods. Guess where we are with Saquon Barkley? 1,500 touches.
Yeah.
I mean, normally the Eagles are very cognizant of that. What is it? Just overreaction to the collapse? Why the shift? Why the shift away from that analytical approach when it comes to tread on the tire with running backs?
Well, I mean, that's a big question, John. I mean, what he's got left. Particularly when you throw in the ACL he had. I just got to believe they're not going to give him 20 plus carries a game every week. I think we're going to see Gainwell mixed in there. And again, there's a tendency when you throw a lot to a running back to not factor in those receptions as much as you do carries, because you're not getting hit by linebackers and defensive tackles as much. I don't think, it's a 2-year, it's essentially a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
They can get rid of him in 2 years without much. So, I mean, it's not a big investment. I was a little, obviously I was surprised to see it happen. I mean, I said there was 0% chance they would sign Barkley.
I'm with you.
It certainly is a departure from Howie's thinking. And I think you're right. This is a Howie move that, a guy like a lot of these guys, he's liked since they were drafted and is hoping they still have something left.
And I'll give you my at least quasi-educated guess as to what the Eagles' line of thinking was here. Now, please listen carefully. There are exceptions to the rule, like Christian McCaffrey. I'm not going to say that Saquon Barkley is Christian McCaffrey or equates to or is on a parallel with. I'm just saying the Eagles look at him like, yeah, Johnny's right. 1,500 carries, boom, the roof fell in on Zeke Elliott. So it has to happen the same exact way. I'm not going to say that either. There are some guys that are exceptions to the rule, and I think McCaffrey is one. And I believe they believe Saquon's another. Not that he's going to do exactly what McCaffrey did in San Francisco, but they believe the eventual drop-off isn't necessarily going to happen in the next 2 years. He's a different type player, different type athlete. That's my line of thinking as to why they decided to make the investment in Barkley.
Another thing to factor in here is, I mean, they're not done. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the draft yet.
No.
I mean, there's going to be another running back on this team.
Jamal Singleton was out looking at Aldrich Estime from Notre Dame yesterday. A big, powerful back. So you're right. There's going to be somebody else outside of Kenny Gainwell.
All right, so
outside of Boston Scott.
Let me put this to both you guys, because John and I haven't talked about this yet. I think we did last year, but top 30 visits. I think generally, just speaking generally, people overemphasize this. Number one, the Eagles have only 8 picks. They don't have 30. They got 8. And 8 is actually a decent number. Some teams have less than that. So you get 30 visits. You're not going to be using them all to draft players. But, people, oh, my God, he came in for a top 30 visit. Yes, so what? They're going to just do the math right now. There are going to be 22 guys who come in for a top 30 visit who will not be Philadelphia Eagles. I will guarantee you that. I guess Howie could trade down and pick up an extra pick. At the minimum of 21 players who are going to come in who will not be Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, shoot, I shouldn't say that either because they'll be undrafted free agent. But a whole bunch of them, at least 2/3 of them, aren't going to be Philadelphia Eagles. Do people overplay the top 30 visits, Damo, or is it a truly significant tool that you circle and underline when you see a guy's coming in and go, oh, I got to remember that leading up to the draft because that means the Eagles are really interested, really going to be ready to pick that player. What's your read on top 30 visits for players coming into teams before the draft?
Well, with respect to I think it varies depending on the team, but with the Eagles, I mean, I've always paid attention to it because they seem to have a higher percentage of guys who were drafted that were were one of those 30 visits, which is why when I look at some of the offensive linemen they brought in early on their top 30 visits, you're pretty sure that one of them is going to get drafted by the Eagles in the first or second round. I pay attention with the Eagles because I think they have a tendency to draft the guys they bring in. If and again, not all because they don't have 30.
Yeah,
right.
But I was, I look at themes. I always say, Damo. So you mentioned they've already brought in a ton of offensive linemen, so they're taking an offensive lineman on those first 3 picks. I tend to look at it that way, but also, I think, and you remember the Darius Geist situation. I do think people assume when you hear so-and-so visited with so-and-so team, that's always, most people think of, oh, that's a positive. They must be interested. They might be ruling the guy out just as much. And Darius Geist would be the best example of that since he's yelling at Deuce Staley in the building, or allegedly, I should say. It could be negative just as much as positive, but you're right. They want to do homework on these particular players. So it's probably a good idea to keep their names in mind that if it does go positive, this guy might be a selection. But when the theme is, hey, there's a bunch of offensive linemen coming in, that's probably a good indication that the Eagles are going to take an offensive lineman over the first 2 days. No question about that.
All right, so I'm going to hold both you guys' feet to the fire. They got 8 picks as of right now, and we'll have to readjust on the fly come the 3-day draft period. But let's say they make 8 picks. How many out of the 8 are going to be guys who came in for a top 30 visit?
I'll go 4.
Yeah, I'll go about 50%. That's a good number.
I would go 3, but even if you're right 4, that's 50%. That's in some things in life. If you're a Major League Baseball hitter, you hit 50%, you're guaranteed to go in the Hall of Fame. If you're an NFL field goal kicker, you hit 50%, you're on the unemployment line. So it depends on how you look at it. 50% doesn't wow me at all.
If that's the over-under 4 out of 8, I'd probably take the under, but I think that's a good place to set it out, the over-under.
Right. So for those who are going to get all geeked up about who they had in for top 30 visits,
remember,
it's going to be 50% at best.
You might like a guy and somebody else might take him.
Right.
I mean, somebody else might like him.
Yeah, I'm factoring that in when I'm going to take calls that guys are going to get on the stream here and go, yeah, but they had him in for a top 30 visit. So what?
I had Jerry Rice's kid in for a top, or they're having him in. I don't know if he got here yet. Does that mean they're taking Jerry Rice's kid?
They might not.
You don't do Jerry Rice. You never know.
Don't get exercised about it one way or the other. Damo, always a pleasure. You got any big weekend plans? You gonna wear that shirt all weekend, do some barbecuing or anything like that?
Oh, it's too cold, man. It's gonna rain. We're having the storm of the century
tomorrow. We're supposed to get flooding. So
yeah.
And by the way, isn't it like March something? What's it? I should know what goddamn date it is. March 22nd means we're sneaking up on April. I'm freezing outside.
Oh, it's brutal.
Get the dog out this morning. I'm wearing a winter coat, a pullover hat, whatever. When the hell is winter leaving?
I love it. I don't want to cut the grass. So
listen to you.
I want it to stay like this forever.
I can't wait to get out and cut the grass in that shirt. He's lying to us, but he tells us the truth about his football beliefs, and we always appreciate it. Damo, we'll talk to you again next week. Have a great week, bud.
Thanks, bud.
Read him on the 33rd team and in season with us here on JAKIB Sports.
He's in for a top 30 visit. Damo.
Top 30 what? Hawaiian shirts? He and Andy Reid and 28 others.
Top 30 visits. Who else do we have? Let's see. Jerry Rice's kid. What do you know about Christian Mahogany from Boston College? He's a guard. Brandon Coleman from TCU, another guard.
Which, by the way, where are you getting these? Who are you trusting to give you this information?
A bunch of different places. A bunch of agents say it themselves. Sometimes the players say it. I don't have my list. I keep a list. Sometimes it comes from the players themselves on Instagram or Twitter or somewhere. Sometimes it comes from the Inquirer had a few.
Right.
Sometimes
you get your information wherever you get your information, which is good, which is smart. But again, how much stock do you actually put into it on the Eagles drafting the player come 1 month from now when the NFL draft comes?
I look, like I said, I look at the themes, and they brought in a crap load of offensive linemen, or are scheduled to bring in a crap load of offensive linemen. So I look at the themes more than the individuals.
That might actually be a better way to look at it, Johnny Mac. All right, Mac, quickie timeout, come back. I got one more thing I want to run by John before we get guest number 2 up, which would be the voice of the Eagles in Espanol. We haven't had our guy Ricky Ricardo up in months. Good to talk Eagles football with Ricky Ricardo coming up in the next 10 minutes here on Birds 365. Hey, Eagle fans, have I got a deal for you? How would you like to save significantly on your car insurance? Upwards of 40%. You can do so right now from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you need to do to get the ball rolling. Call managing partner Jim and or Fran and tell them you're a friend of both JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!